Hello, everybody. Brian Schwager, founder of Wellness Movement Services. Today, let's talk about balancing out the four principles. In all the services that I provide, the four principles stand as the pillar. They are the foundation to everything. It doesn't matter who I'm working with, whether your goals are to become a lead athlete, to compete at a higher level. Maybe you just want to get fit. You want to feel better and move better. You want to increase your strength. Maybe you want to increase your bone density. You want to live a healthier life and avoid drugs and avoid complications to your health later in life. It doesn't matter because all of these individuals that are striving for different goals in their life will need to balance these four principles in some way, shape, or form. That's why I created them. After working years and years and years in the industry and evolving and morphing into what I am now as a holistic personal trainer, technically, I'm a corrective, holistic, high performance exercise kinesiologist. But to keep it simple, I'm a holistic personal trainer. Listening to hundreds of people and finding out that there are four basic things that need to be addressed in order for them to accomplish what they were looking to accomplish. So, in this diagram, which I created several years ago, I put the image of the anatomy in the middle because the body is interconnected with these four principles. I've often said to people that have come to me in pain, that have back problems and knee problems. And for the sake of this video, let's change the word from problem to challenge because the word challenge means that I'm going to overcome it. So with these back and knee and shoulder and neck challenges, I would always say to my client, you don't have a knee challenge, you have a body challenge. You don't have a back challenge, you have a body challenge. And what holistic really means is addressing the whole person. There are many reasons why a person has pain. It's not just because of the mechanical reason or what we would call the physical health reason. There are many reasons why that pain is there. And we have to start looking at the body as a whole, in that it all interrelates, it's all interconnected. Well, that's kind of a preview of the four principles. Now, if you know who I am, then you know about these four principles. And that principle number one is emotional health. Why is it number one? Because it is the number one complaint that I see recorded in my questionnaires. When I look at a rating, and I'll talk about this in a minute, when I rate your wellness and movement, what I have found since I started rating this in the last 7 years is that the emotional health area usually has the highest score, the highest rating, because people have a hard time handling their stress. And then there's the sleep, biochemical health. People are not sleeping. So, how are we sleeping? We have to have that in order to recover and restore. And then, of course, principle number three, nutritional health, how we digest. And to go further, what and when are we eating and drinking? This is the fuel for the body. And if it's not properly implemented, if you're putting the wrong fuel in your engine, you're going to get let's just say you're going to get a dysfunctional response. And then lastly is physical health. How are we moving? What is our movement competency? Where are the imbalances before we start to put strength on top of the imbalance? We must first see where that imbalance is. In other words, we cannot build a house on a weak foundation. So why should we just throw ourselves into fitness and go after these goals without first seeing where the imbalances are? Now, basically, people come to me and have come to me for years because of their physical challenges. They have endurance challenges. They have strength limitations. They have tightness. And then when I started working in orthopedic fitness, we had people that were experiencing pain. And that's really what my focus was in the 90s at the beginning of my career, going all the way back to the late 80s. But what I later found in the late 90s was that, there are other contributing factors to these movement dysfunctions, the pain and the weaknesses, etc. And as I kept my mind open and went back to school after I relocated to Asheville, North Carolina, I really began to embrace this holistic and what I also call an integrated method towards helping people to become, you know, um, healthy and fit. Now, what I want them to do is I want them to feel and move well. In other words, if you're not moving well, that doesn't mean you need to move more. That might mean that. But what we really should be looking at is how are we feeling? How we feel. Are we feeling stressed? Are we tired? Do we have digestive challenges? And then that later morphs into physical pain, physical limitations. The physical manifestation of my clients' challenges are a byproduct of the first three principles being out of balance. And that I've proven beyond a shadow of a doubt working with people and working with other high level practitioners who have helped me to qualify this over the years. You have multiple systems in the body, and they're all communicating with each other. You have the skeletal system, the nervous system, the circulatory system, the lymphatic system, and I can go on for all 10. But what I'm getting at here is that your body is a system of systems. It's a cybernetic organism that has bioelectricity thriving throughout the systems so that they can communicate with each other. Hence, when I go back to saying, I look at physical movement last after I've collected some subjective data on the first three principles. Yes, I'm going to collect subjective data on my client's physical health. Do you have pain? Do you have movement restrictions? Have you ever had a head injury? Have you ever had an orthopedic injury? Yes, I have that covered. But what about, hey, how much stress have you been under the last 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years? How was your sleep? How are you digesting food? What kind of food are you putting in your body? When are you eating? These all contribute to the physical health paradigm. And by just looking at physical health, we are in no way really addressing the physical health challenge. Well, what does movement restrictions have to do with your emotional health? I'll get asked. Well, hey, have you ever had your neck get tight after you've been in an argument, after you've under some emotional stress? Your brain, when it's under a high level amount of stress, can create tonic tightness, or it can also create weakness in the muscles. Did you know that? If you're not recovering, when you're not sleeping adequately, how do you think your body's going to rebuild tissues if you're not giving it the time, the energy, or the nutrition, the fuel to rebuild with? It all comes down to when people have physical health challenges, I believe it's a manifestations of the first three principles that are out of balance. So, multiple systems. And then how are we rating our wellness and movement? I mean, do we really even know where we are on the continuum of this grading scale? Well, certainly, I'm sure you could look at both of these and tell me where you're at. But how do you know that? Well, because of how you feel. Do you have aches and pains? Do you feel tired, loss of energy? Do you actually feel movement restrictions? Well, you're identifying with your body and how it feels. And that's good because then I can get a subjective rating. Rating your wellness in movement is no different than rating your blood pressure. There is a baseline for blood pressure and cholesterol. We'll use those two as an example. And what the medical profession is trying to do is keep you within the norms. Because if you go outside the baseline, you're at risk for cardiovascular disease and other illnesses will go up. So they establish these baselines and then they rate them, whether it be every 4 months, every 6 months, once a year, whenever they're going to do your blood pressure and your blood work. I think it's a good idea because now we have some concrete evidence to show where am I at. Well, I thought about this and I said, well, why don't we rate wellness and movement and give people an idea where they're at? Not just feeling, well, Brian, I feel lousy, right? But when I can go and ask questions that are directly related to each one of these principles and create a rating scale. Here's a before, here's a total overall score of 215 out of a total score of 494. So they're in the moderate risk category, moving towards high risk. And then I looked at each principle and rated it based off of my algorithm. And then after we worked together for a while, we start bringing those ratings down because we made changes in lifestyle. Well, let's go back to this for a minute. Lifestyle? Yes, you have to change your lifestyle in order to move well, in order to sleep well, eat well, and definitely think well. It's a lifestyle challenge. And that is really being more and more understood that, it's all based on how we're living. That's what we have to look at. We have to look at the core foundations of our lifestyle to determine our rating. And as we rate and as we move ourselves towards, feeling and moving well, as you were, then our stress load goes down. Now, here's another example. When these stress loads go up, they accumulate. One feeds off of the other, which feeds off of the other. Remember, they're all communicating here. All of the systems, all of the principles are communicating with one another. So if I have emotional stress that is very high, it will affect my sleep, it will affect my nutrition, and it will affect my health. And the more that repeats and accumulates, like filling up a bucket, eventually it's going to overflow and you're going to find your load, your stress load, increasing. And when your stress load increases, you have a decreased tolerance for exercise. You see at the top where it says rating your readiness for exercise? How ready are we to exercise? And then when we look at exercise, exercise in and of itself is a medicine. But if wrongly prescribed, it can have tremendous side effects. So if someone has a high physiological stress load rating, and I'm not aware of this, and I'm designing an exercise program that will make it worse unknowingly, then my prescription has just caused a side effect. And this is happening all over the place. But what I'm getting at is the accumulation of these four principles having a manifestation on the physical. The physical is the last because to me, for me, it's the easiest to restore. Only if I first addressed the three principles that precede it. My objective is I want to get to the cause of my client's concerns. And I'm going to use an integrated holistic approach. Even when I look at the body itself, I want to make sure that I'm looking at complete movement and not just muscles. That, we're beyond that point. That when we're looking at the anatomy, we need to look at the entire system of systems. So when I look at the muscular system, in the muscular system, there are various levels of muscular activity. So when my client has a knee issue, which I get a lot of, I look below to the ankle, I look above to the hip, I look to the middle of the, or I look at the entire core, and sometimes I go as high as looking at the cervical for that knee disposition. That's just from a mechanical standpoint. I haven't gotten into the emotional standpoint, the biochemical or the nutritional. All I'm looking at is what's short and tight and what's long and weak, because the body is built off of a lever system. On one side of the body, if we have tightness, the opposite side will be long and weak. So it's just a matter of finding out length tension relationships. And remember, like I said, you know, we have all these risk factors for injury, if I might digress on the physical for a moment. And yet we're not looking at it completely. So even here with the 10 musculoskeletal health risk factors, we have 10 that will increase your risk for injury. What's the number one? It's a previous injury. First question I ask, have you ever been injured? Yes. Well, all right, then you already have a chance for a re-injury. Now that's not negative. That's just me knowing that, because in my past I had back injuries and knee injuries and shoulder injuries, and I didn't know this at the time. So what did I keep doing? I kept re-injuring them. And it wasn't until really after the year 2000 that I could now honestly say, even though today I'll answer the same question. I had a previous injury, but I've done the homework. So my chances of re-injury have just gone down greatly compared to maybe 1991. Because I had injuries in the 80s. And in 1991, if you would have asked me this question, I would have said, yeah, I have an injury. I had an injury rather. And 5, 6 years later, I have more problems. Muscle imbalances, going back to the length tension relationship. Is one side of the muscle short and tight, the other side long and weak? You have a muscle imbalance. Is your posture out of alignment? You have muscle imbalances. So a lot of people, 99% of people, have muscle imbalances without even knowing it. And I'm not going to go through all 10, but look at number 6. That's now considered a contributing factor for the risk for muscle, joint, and bone injuries. Isn't that incredible? What does lifestyle factors have to do with my muscles? Well, we just talked about this, that when you look at your emotional health, your biochemical health, and your nutritional health, and those are out of balance, well, guess what's going to end up, where it's going to end up showing up? It always shows up in the body. The body keeps the score, and the person who is adjusting the score is on the inside. Now, the inside could be your mental, emotional health, your sleep deprivation. You're not getting the sleep. You're putting in the wrong fuel. You're not digesting foods. You're not producing the right hormones, et cetera, et cetera. And then we end up with a deficit, and that deficit is pain. Now, all of this is important, because if we don't teach people how to balance it out, and we don't have to make it complicated, because I know that when my clients bring me these challenges, they're very complicated. I just give them steps, or what I call action steps, towards correcting each one of the principles. All right, so emotional health. How do you handle stress? Do you respond more than you react to when there's changes in life? Do you find yourself short-tempered? Do you get anxious? And there are other emotional health symptoms that will lead to health challenges in the future. And it's not about, decreasing the stress in your life. Now, I'm sure that we can find ways to decrease it, right? You can move away from a noisy neighbor. You can fix something that's been broken, and now that thing that's fixed doesn't give you the stress anymore. Yes, that works. But basically, stress is in everyday life. And where does stress really exist? In the weakest muscle in your body, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, that's right, your brain, your processor. your CPU. This is where it all is going to take place. So when something goes wrong in my life, if my processor is weak, my perception will be distorted, which means that now I'm going to react more than I'm going to respond. When my processor is in balance, I'm going to respond more than I'm going to react. So let me repeat that. When stress happens in my life, it's how I process it that will determine how I'm going to, receive it, if you will. Because there's a difference between responding to stress versus reacting. And I'll tell you that it takes practice to learn this, to learn how to manage the mind and not the stress, because thoughts control how we perceive life. So managing our thoughts, or like what they teach in Buddhism, right thinking, we change that and control that. Then when stress occurs, now when it occurs in my life, my mind is in better shape. I have better emotional fitness to handle the stresses that come into my life. And with practice, it even got easier. What's the difference? Reacting versus responding. Teaching yourself to use your mind to your advantage. So I teach mind training and mind control. But what I'm getting at here is that your stress is connected to everything. 90% of illnesses are directly connected to stress. And that thoughts are things. Thoughts have chemicals attached to them, like Dr. Candace Pert discovered. When I have a bad thought, it produces these bad peptides. And no wonder my whole day is shot. My whole body feels like crap after high stress. My neck is tight. My back might be tight. I might be burnt out, tired from the emotional stress. And that your brain is directly connected to your organs and your tissues. Remember the 10 systems in the body. This body has been beautifully designed by God. He made no mistakes. And here you are learning today that your brain is directly connected to your organs and tissues. And like in this image here, you look at the piano keys. Each key represents a direct connection to the vertebrae, and each section of the vertebrae is tied in with organs. So someone has, someone has lower back tightness or pain. Well, they could have prostate challenges, they could have kidney challenges, etc., reproductive challenges. They could also have challenges in their life. I've often asked people when they've had these pain episodes, I've often asked them, what's going on in your life right now? Oh, I'm going through a hell of a divorce. Well, your divorce and losing your partnership is losing love. And love is is one of the main foundations to life. I think it's everything to life, but where you live, who loves you, and how much money you have seems to be the top three, isn't it? I got to have food, water, shelter, and I need to be loved. And when those things aren't met, the body keeps the score. And then we have these sleep issues, something I really began to notice in the late 90s. Sleep issues. And that we don't understand that you have a circadian rhythm. You have a biological clock that keeps you in rhythm all day long. So you wake up with the sun and you naturally release cortisol so that you can go out and achieve and make money and, you know, service your family. And that cortisol eventually comes down. And by the middle to late afternoon, you're starting to release hormones to get you ready for sleep and repair. But the challenge is is we live in a high stressful environment because we don't manage our thoughts, we don't manage our eating, and we definitely don't manage our sleep. So what we're left with is a deficit. If you keep withdrawing money from your account, you're going to be in debt. So now you're waking up with cortisol, but that ain't good enough. So you add more energy by the way of coffee and stimulants. And there's nothing wrong with coffee if it's used properly. But what happens is after 1 or 2 in the afternoon, somebody's getting really tired. And what they do is they feel they have to jack themselves up with more stimulants. So what they're doing is they're artificially providing themselves with energy at a cost. All I'm saying is this is what people are living with, and not just to say the emotional, stress. But let's go back to the balanced. When your circadian rhythm is in balance, you are building. You are building up, and that's an anabolic response. You are rejuvenating, restoring, building. You are rising, you are growing. And with that anabolic response, you will have proper restoration at night. So between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. is when your body physically repairs, and between 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. is when your body's brain is repairing. I say that just in general terms. However, when we are not in rhythm, you are in a catabolic response, which means to break down, to deteriorate. That's disease. So we have this catabolic response. We're not getting our physical repair because we're going to bed way after 10:30, 11, or 12 o'clock. We're waking up at 1, 2, or 3 in the morning and can't get back to sleep. So we take these drugs to help us get that sleep, and it's artificial. Now, there's a time and a place for medicines, but we have abused that privilege and gotten people dependent on them, and or we've screwed up their natural process. What I'm talking about is sleep and the lack thereof. Well, nutrition, well, I can go all day on this. So how are you digesting foods? And how would you know if your digestion isn't right? I just said to you, how's your digestion? How would you answer that? The average person is going to say, I think it's fine. Now, we have to ask different types of questions. In other words, if your digestive tract is out of balance, then your blood system is out of balance, your lymphatic system is out of balance, and even your cardiovascular system is affected by digestion. Do you have excessive burping, belching, gas? Do you have bloated feelings after you've eaten certain foods? And remember, going back to the 4 principles, if you're under high emotional stress, your stomach is affected. What about your immune system? Did you know that 70 to 80% of your immune system lives in your gut? We all talk about being resistant against disease and all the colds and flus and whatever you want to call it. You got an immune system. God designed one of the most powerful defense systems in your body called your immune system. And 70 to 80% is right here in the gut. And now our guts are screwed up. So we have no first line of defense against illness and disease. It all starts in the gut. Gut is a determining factor to whether or not you're going to get illness. How does that work? Well, look at the factors here. We have leaky gut. This is one example, and I don't like to label things either, ladies and gentlemen, but to drive this point home, we have leaky gut. We have irritable bowel syndrome. We have dysbiosis and a host of other imbalances to the gut flora. And when the gut is out of balance, it affects our organs, our endocrine systems. It can affect our joints. All right. And the symptoms that we get are an outward expression. So if you have constant sinus drainage, that's a symptom. That's an outward expression that your body's trying to get rid of poisons. If you have inflammation in your joints, that's an outward expression showing you that your body is full of heat. it's inflamed. If you're constantly fatigued, that's showing you that your adrenals are overworked. Going back to this image, if you're constipated, you're holding back something in life, but also you're not eliminating that fecal matter, which is a real problem. If you have having problems losing weight, you may have a thyroid disorder, and that has directly been linked to digestive dysfunction. And then we have the acne, the eczema, and the depression and the anxiety. So between our skin and our brain, these are all of these together, ladies and gentlemen, are symptoms. And your body's trying to send you a message. All disease begins in the gut. That's Hippocrates, all of it. So it's even been noted that fungus and viruses are a beginning result to cancers now. They're looking at not only the inflammatory responses in the body, but they're looking at these funguses and viruses and parasites that have gone out of control in the body. Now, I don't want to get into that topic because it's very deep. But what I'm saying here, ladies and gentlemen, nutritional health. How are we digesting? What are you eating? What kind of fuel are you putting in your body? Is it servicing you? All them years, 1940, 1950, 1960, we were spraying these chemicals on these plants. And look what this guy is wearing. And we're going to eat that plant. And now what they do is they put it right in the seed. Now you have no choice unless you don't buy that food. And you're putting these pesticides, fungicides, and let's just say these dirty little chemicals in your body, which will produce long-term symptoms. When are you eating? If you want to lose body fat, your last meal of the day should be your smallest. And we're not drinking enough water. And all right, so everybody's carrying around water bottles. So maybe they are drinking more water compared to 20 years ago, but they're not absorbing it because the water's not structured. God structured the water for a reason. Did you know that the blood and the lymph, which are two highly fluid rich environments, that those fluids are structured? Highly structured molecular fluid. Now, the water has to be structured because it identifies with the organism. The other thing about water is it conducts electricity. It's a transducer of energy. So not only we are dehydrated, we're not getting water into the cell and into the intricacies of those cells to produce energy. Because inside of 50 million or so cells in your body, you have a little generator called a mitochondria. And the mitochondria is the generator of that cell. But they get depleted and they die out because they're not being fed the transducent electricity from the structured water that's supposed to get past the membrane of the cell and get into the mitochondria to ignite and create combustion, which creates energy. And then there's physical health. So we have all these musculoskeletal conditions, all of them. I know, I'm in the profession and I've seen it grow. And I said to myself back in the late 90s, and I say it now, with all the advancements we have made then and we have made now in the areas of orthopedic medicine, or even orthopedic fitness, physical therapy, and health in general, why do we still have a rising incidence of lower back pain? It doesn't make sense because we're not looking at the body as a whole, number one. And we're not looking at, lifestyle factors, number two. The body as a whole. We talked about the two leading predictors to injury. We just talked about the orthopedic dilemma. We showed you this, and we come to this. And we know that exercise is great for everybody, but not everybody's created equal. And the one size fits all is out the window. And number two, We have to assess, we don't guess before we design an exercise program for an individual. The stats are here. I can show you the statistics all day long, and we're still making that mistake. So the point I'm making, movement. We need to assess movement and not just look at muscles. And we do this by addressing what we call the performance pyramid, that the pyramid is only as stable as the base is wide. So this wide base down here, if it's narrowed because we have imbalances, movement restrictions, etc., but we skip that step, which so many people do, they just start building on top of the imbalance or the weak foundation, and they start having performance problems, and it starts affecting their skill because they didn't do the work in the base. Now, underneath the base, I've created another category called the sub-base, the deep, deep inner core that nobody knows about. I've shown this picture and explained this hundreds of times to people, professionals, etc. And especially the lay person, they'll look at me and go, I had no idea that we had an inner core that operated different from an outer core. And inside of your core, you have stabilizers that stabilize your spine. Well, where's the core? Well, the core is not just the center of your body. The core represents from the top of the shoulders all the way down to those hip flexors I was talking about, your psoas. Let me see if I have a picture of your psoas here. There it is. There's your psoas. That's part of your core. Now on the back side, it goes from your upper trapezius, right there, all the way down to your glutes. So you have a front core, you have an upper, middle, and lower. You have a back core, upper, middle, and lower. You have an outer core, which is what everybody admires, 6-pack and 8-pack abs. And then you have the inner core, and that is where everything is happening. Now, your outer core will stabilize you as you move, no doubt. But what stabilizes the spinal column itself is the inner core. So in order to stabilize the spine, no matter what part of the spine we're talking about here, it could be a cervical injury, middle of the back, lower back, the inner core wraps around your body like a belt and inserts back here by these spinal muscles called your multifidi, etc. That is your first responder to protecting your spine. So if you're going to kick a ball, you're going to run up and kick that ball, that little inner core better respond first because it is your first responder before that foot makes contact. Or if you're doing a running race and you're about to take off, and once that foot hits the ground, you have ground reaction forces. That better be on, because if it's not, and if it's not reflexing on, then all the forces are being distributed to the joints and the spine. This is how spines get beat up. And there's a way of testing the inner core compared to the outer core. So if somebody comes to me with pain, I do what's called a selective functional movement assessment. It is a movement-based diagnostic system which systematically finds the cause of pain, not just the source. And there's a number of other tests that I do along with the SFMA. And with the SFMA, I can rate and rank your movement challenges. If you don't have pain, then I'll use the functional movement screen. Talked about a screen versus an assessment. And these primal movement patterns that I take my clients through will show me where their movement competency is. In fact, the SFMA and the FMS, they were the first to create a rating and ranking system for movement competency, not only from a physical therapy standpoint, but they were the first to introduce a rating system in fitness so that we can take these 7 tests, score it, rate it, and see where you rate in your movement. Isn't that great? If you don't qualify, if you don't earn your rite of passage, you shouldn't be playing hard. But, what we covered today is the 4 principles. And what we looked at briefly in each one is if we can find balance, then we will feel and move well. All right. I hope you stay empowered, keep your faith, have trust, and know that everything that you're receiving in life is right on time, just like this information. And if I can do anything more for you, there'll be contact information to follow this video. Have a great day. Bye for now.